Today, we're diving deep into one of the most disturbing urban legends that has haunted the web for years, the Russian sleep experiment. The story begins in the 1940s, during the height of the Cold War, where the Soviet Union was known for conducting brutal, secretive experiments, some of which have never been fully documented. One such experiment allegedly involved 5 political prisoners, chosen as test subjects for a sleep deprivation study. Here's the setup. These 5 prisoners, mostly criminals or those deemed enemies of the state, were promised their freedom if they participated in the study. What they didn't know was that the experiment would push them to their physical and mental limits, beyond what any human could endure. The prisoners were placed in a sealed room, the only source of light, a dim, constant bulb. There was no escape, no windows, and no way of knowing if they were being watched. The researchers, in true Soviet fashion, wanted to see how long it would take for the human mind to break without sleep. The experiment was set to last 30 days. At first, the prisoners were compliant, as they were promised their release after the experiment. But things quickly started to unravel. By the 3rd day, the prisoners were already showing signs of psychological distress. Some began muttering to themselves, while others started to cry uncontrollably. The lack of sleep was taking its toll. As days passed, the subjects became more erratic. The constant exhaustion started to twist their minds. On day 9, one of the prisoners screamed in terror, convinced that the walls of the room were closing in on him. He became delusional, hearing whispers in the corners of the chamber, and started to claw at his own skin. By day 15, the experiment had completely gone off the rails. The prisoners were no longer recognizable. One man, in an attempt to escape the madness, began to dig at his own flesh with his fingernails, while another started to hallucinate violently. He was found talking to thin air, claiming he could hear the voices of ghosts calling his name. The men's physical appearances deteriorated. Their eyes were sunken, their bodies gaunt, their skin pale and blotchy. Yet despite all this, they refused to sleep. It was as if their bodies and minds were trapped in a waking nightmare they could never escape. Then came the truly horrifying part. On day 20, one of the men suddenly stopped moving. At first, the researchers thought he had died, but when they checked on him, they discovered he was still alive. His pulse was faint, but steady. In fact, he was fully conscious, though unable to speak or move. Things took an even darker turn on day 27. The remaining 4 prisoners had become so deranged that they started tearing each other apart. They were described as feral, completely disconnected from reality. When the researchers entered the room to intervene, they found something worse than they could have ever imagined. The prisoners, now barely human, had mutilated themselves. One had ripped off his own face, while another had eaten pieces of his own body. But it was the surviving prisoner, the one who had been motionless, that had the most terrifying experience. He whispered a single sentence as they approached. "I am still awake." According to the story, the remaining survivors were killed, and all evidence of the experiment was erased. But there are those who believe that this story is based on real events, that the Soviet Union was involved in dark experiments we'll never know about. Was it real, or just an elaborate hoax? I don't know about you, but just hearing that story gives me chills. It's one of those tales that seems too horrific to be true, but it's still out there, lurking in the shadows. It makes you wonder, could there be some truth behind it? Or is it just a myth meant to frighten us? Whatever the case, the Russian sleep experiment remains one of the most terrifying creepypastas of all time. And while it's important to remember that it's just a story, a chilling piece of internet folklore, it's still the kind of tale that keeps you up at night. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as creepy as I did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments if you think the Russian sleep experiment could actually be real, or if it's just a terrifying myth. Until next time, stay safe, and don't lose sleep over this one.